So welcome to this end of 2025 roundup video. Just going to be covering kind of things that we've done during the course of this year, what other content we've still got coming. So I'll run through some points here. First things that I've done during the course of this year are mechanical to the car. I had the leak on the radiator, so I had to replace the front radiator. And while I was at it, I also replaced all the fans with some more modern fans. So I've got that video to come up. I also replaced some of the hoses. The water pump needed to be replaced, which was itself quite an undertaking. In fact, changing the water pump with the engine still in the car ended up being really a two-person job. And there's quite a lot of ancillaries and things that have to come off. The vacuum pump has to come off, the cam belt has to come off, the alternator, every kind of stuff needs to come off just to give you the access. In fact, because the water pump that was on there hadn't had one of the bolts replaced on it with the hex nut, I had to take off one of the sprockets itself, which meant having to get a puller to get that off as well and try to keep everything in line. So there's quite a lot of work involved in that. It took a little bit of time, and I've got to kind of work out how I'm going to do the videos for that, and that might find it quite interesting. So we've had the cam belt, the vacuum pump, also done the fuel filter, timing, oil filter and oil change. Fairly normal stuff that really, but I've also got that content captured as well. On the upcoming videos of the car to get it to the state it's in now, obviously one of the recent ones I published was to bringing the car home. Following on from that, I've already got a significant part of the next one's edited, and that was some of the lighting changes that I've done. So I've improved some of the interior lighting, including adding some mood lighting. There's some underglow lighting that was added, primarily added because one of the reasons for getting the car done was to take my son to the prom. I wanted to use that a little bit more of a flare. Turned out it was sunny during the day, so you couldn't see it anyway. But it it's an interesting thing to do, and I kind of like the way it looks when it does it. Not that I've ever really used it, but it's an interesting thing to do. Some electrics that went on with that as well. Following on from that, there's the video on that of basically putting in all the carpets, making the carpets fit. It's basically at that point then actually that I started then really trying to create video content that have been primarily just phone capture and photographs. So that should be more interesting to watch. That does in itself pose slightly different more problems with editing. A lot of it I've done, but whereas before it kind of case of doing slideshows and making it appear a bit more interesting with some video content in there when you had them, because I've now got a lot of video content, there's a lot of that has to be kind of filtered through, captured, and worked out basically what parts are actually interesting, what parts are relevant. I mean, there's a lot of putting in a carpet where it's the same kind of thing over and over again. You don't want to keep seeing that, of course. But those videos are coming up soon. Both of those are almost nearly edited and almost done. Following on from that, we've also got the headlining. Again, there's more actual video work of the headlining being reattached to the fiberglass panels, and then refitting those in and fitting them as they are, and then obviously putting all the interior back in. So that's kind of stuff which I expect to be getting out fairly soon. It's going through some of the other problems that we had here. One of the issues which I did have actually on the early usage of the car, actually wasn't that long before the prom, which did cause a little bit of a minor heart attack, shall we say. Proved in the end to be down to bad fuel. But I was going to one of the car events, and the car kind of started smoking and quite severely, and then wouldn't fire up and start and run, and ended up having to be flatbedded home. It turned out ultimately that ended up being due to some bad fuel that I picked up on the journey. But what's actually more interesting about that is possibly looking at the resolution of the problem, identifying the cause of the issue, because there's a lot of things it could have been. Checking compression. I was testing myself because the amount of smoke that was getting chucked out the back and nothing was firing. Perhaps I had problems with the cylinders or rings or something was all gone on, my valves. There's a whole load of horrid thoughts that were going through my mind at the time of what it could have been. But thankfully it ended up being a relatively simple issue, but was still quite complex to get to the bottom of. And even then resolving it was actually more complex than you might think. I mean, obviously one of the problems is it ended up being bad fuel. I literally just filled up the car. So there was, 80 litres of fuel in the car, which I then needed to drain out and get rid of. Now I phoned things like the local council and I had to get rid of how to get rid of this, and they wasn't very helpful. They just said you'll take it to your local refuse centre. Obviously, the local refuse centre did not want to take fuel, which I didn't think they would. The other feedback I got was, I'll take it to your fuel, to your local fuel services station. And it was like, well, yeah, they're not going to take it either. What I'm going to do, turn up with 80 litres of fuel and just leave it outside their kiosk or something? It's a rather silly situation. End up then having to get a specialist in to come and remove it anyway. But thankfully, because I'd already taken it out of the car and I had it stored in containers, that wasn't a major task. But it's another interesting thing that kind of come across you wouldn't necessarily have thought about. But it was quite interesting, the fuel. In fact, I may even still have some over here. You can't quite see it, but I didn't even make out the sludge that's in the bottom there. And obviously that was all mixed in. You couldn't see that when I was taking it out of the car at the time. It did just have a slightly different smell and looked a slightly more different colour. I suppose you could have said, actually, because it's all settled out, if I had kept to 80 litres of it and let it settled out, I could have siphoned it off and it might have been fine. But I didn't. But that's another interesting thing which I wasn't quite expecting. So one of the other things I've got to do on the car as it stands, obviously now I'm beginning to use the car a lot more, and there are other things that are coming out of the woodwork, as it were, mainly things that are coming up from general maintenance that might come out anyway. I started to get a very slight seeping of oil from the driver's side drive shaft. So I guess the oil seals on that are beginning to go. It's not much, it's just a couple of drops of it on the floor, but it's going to need to be replaced most likely. Something I haven't done before. Again, I shall capture that process and probably do a video of that at some point. What other things have we got on there? Oh yeah, since changing the water pump and the radiator and everything else, I'm also getting some drips and leakage from the two hoses that go into the actual cabin heater. I've replaced Jubilee clips and things on there, but I think it's just, I just need to basically drain it all down again and replace the hoses, because those are two hoses which I didn't replace, and hopefully that would just fix that problem. I'm also still getting a couple of drips from around the edge of the water pump. I hope those going to kind of reseal themselves up. I'm going to have another look at that, just in case, make sure that the bolts are correctly torqued up, whether that's causing a bit of a problem there. It wasn't really much of an issue to start with, but again, there's a couple of little drips of coolant coming out, and it's not coming out there in bearings. I expect it's coming out somewhere else. Might need to sort of torque those up. Hopefully I won't need to take the water pump off and refit it. But as I've done it recently, and I even my own video as a guide now, and perhaps it wouldn't be necessarily that bad, but I'd rather not do it again. I don't think there's really much else that I've really got to do, or as seen as what needs to be done on the car now, really. There are things I might like to do at some point. It might be nice to replace the manifold, because I've still got the cast iron one on there. It'd be nice to replace that with a proper tubular manifold. Possibly even see about having the turbo refurbished at the same time. I could then look at doing some other mechanical work, possibly to improve the power, change some of the jet sizes and do it more fuel if I want to change the boost side of it. But I'll be honest, I don't know, I'm not quite sure about that side of it yet. The car's okay to drive as it is, and I think changing that kind of stuff, given the kind of classic car that it is, really, quite happy to keep more of the, I say, reliability. Lotus generally doesn't have a name for reliability, although I'll say, touch wood, this has been relatively reliable. So changing things to give it more power means that things are more likely to be under more stress and more likely to break. But we'll see. Yes, there is one other thing. When I was putting all of the interior back in, one of the cables which adjusts the flap to adjust the direction of airflow from being the vents to the screen doesn't seem to be working. So I don't know whether I've connected that up incorrectly, or perhaps had the cable pulled through too far when I put it on, so the flap doesn't quickly move over. But that's something I'd like to resolve. It hasn't been an issue, in all honesty, all year, because I've not really needed to demist the screen. It's just not been necessary. But certainly when you get into these times of year where you've got colder evenings, this, that and the other, then you can end up with the need to demist the screen potentially, which you can't really do right now. So I may have a look at that over the winter and strip that out. Unfortunately, it does mean I've got to take half the interior out again. Certainly the binnacle or the centre console with the stereo and all that kind of stuff has all got to come out to be able to get to it. So there's quite a lot that has come out to do that. But I may do that as well, just to get another job ticked off the list, and then everything will be done. But while we're actually talking about videos, it's worth actually kind of mentioning some of the stats that's coming out over the last year as well. It's quite interesting. I was working on some of the videos, and I was looking at doing this gas in gaskets thing earlier on. That actually didn't get that many views in all honesty. I was quite surprised that didn't really, gain that much interest. It was quite a lot of work doing that over your organising that with the car owners, and then the times to meet up, and then do the interviews, and then filming the the drive shots and that kind of thing, and the post editing for like a 20-minute or so video. And it's actually not received that many views. I mean, still something I still like to continue to do because it was actually enjoyable to do. But yeah, it's certainly not being as much as a hit as what perhaps I might have expected it to become. The videos, generally speaking, you may have noticed that I'm now really focused on doing much more shorter videos and really compressing the stuff down. And the reason for that is basically because when you look at the stats, even though the channel itself has been getting around about 1,000 views a month, the actual average view time is really only kind of around about 3 minutes. So there's a lot of people that basically watch them and skip through the videos, obviously see the start of it, perhaps have a few seconds in the middle, and then just watch what the end result at the end. Which is, it's just the way it is there, I guess, I suppose. But it's one of those things. It may change, I guess, depending on how content perhaps might change somewhat. But the other interesting thing from that is also things like the number of subs. When you look at the people that are returning to watch a video or the kind of reach of the videos, they're only really getting around 2 to 4% of the watch time is actually from subscribers, which, as I mentioned before, like last year, I wasn't really setting up the channel to chase it and build a YouTube empire or anything like that. It really was just about personal documenting what I was doing with the car and what I enjoy doing, and hopefully other people will also find that interesting. But there are some things about it that when you then start digging into it, if you can get like a minimum amount of subscribers and watch time, etc., you can then start getting some monetization. Now, it's not going to be a great deal, to be honest, but a cup of coffee or buying a bacon roll kind of wouldn't go amiss, as it were. But you're some way off of that, and we shall see how that kind of goes. But I don't know whether to continue doing the very short videos, because then percentage-wise you end up actually getting more watch time per video published, or do the more longer in-depth videos. It may be that as I go forward, when I've got a lot more video content of all the rest of the work that has been done, I may end up releasing 2 videos for each kind of topic, and have like a really compressed version that people can watch something in 5 minutes that covers the basic areas of that, but perhaps have a more in-depth one of 20 minutes or so that goes for more of the actual process and the work involved. And I think that's obviously quite important, because if you're just consuming it as just using it as something to watch, then yes, I can understand perhaps you don't want to watch it for too long necessarily. But if you want to use it as more of a training kind of video to learn how to do something yourself, okay, how does this work? How did this person solve that? Or how did I solve this? Did they come across these kind of problems? Sometimes you want to see the more in-depth detail, including all of the errors and the problems. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, certainly when it comes down to doing the wall time, for instance, there's some cases on there where some of the bolts were quite a challenge to get to remove. And although in a short video it'd be a case of yes, we just need to remove the crank pulleys and the vacuum pump, and then it's gone. If it doesn't have something in it showing about the struggle that some of that was to get off, and then what needs to be done to then subsequently put it all back on, it can be a little bit misleading. At least if someone then comes to tackle it themselves, they say, okay, this was also proved to be this difficult, or this is one thing to expect or what to look out for. So it may be what I do. Kind of see how it goes, really. It's just been down to the amount of time for editing. I mean, for myself personally, there hasn't been there hasn't been that many videos released throughout the main bulk course of the year, actually, to be honest. There was some earlier on in the year, and then basically ones kind of recently towards the end. Mainly because I've been kind of busy doing things on the car, going out to the events, and other side projects I've been working on myself throughout the year. I mean, there's other people that would know me and chat to me otherwise also know I've also been relatively keen in doing things on music, etc. And I've been producing some music singles and that kind of stuff during the course this year, and actually working on an album to get released. In fact, one of the singles has already been released. And that was merely so that the track itself could be used as part of a stage show. So I've been kind of focused on that as something just to, you know, get it done. It's something I always wanted to do, and I kind of get it checked off a bucket list, as it were, and do that. But it has kind of taken some time away on working on the car and doing other such things, and more specifically editing the videos, which just does take time more than anything else. But I should get that done. Hopefully you've enjoyed following along, and we'll continue to do so. And I wish you all a happy new year, and I hope to see you more during the course of 2026. So again, thank you very much.